Now, the greatest radio shows of all time.
Suspense.
The Shadow Node.
Washington calling David Harding, counter-spy.
Classic radio theater.
The Great Gildersleeve.
Fibber McGee and Molly.
Dragnet. Gunsmoke.
The Lone Ranger.
Now, step back into a time machine with your host, Wyatt Cox.
Good evening, friends of the Inner Sanctum.
An episode of radio's outstanding theater of thrills, Suspense. This goes back to June 8, 1944. Donald Crisp and Thomas Mitchell star in the case history of Edgar Lowndes.
In the event of any important news developments, the sponsor will interrupt this program. Roma Wines present
Suspense.
Roma Wines, made in California for enjoyment throughout the world.
Salud. Your health, senor.
Roma Wines toast the world. The wine for your table is Roma Wine, made in California for enjoyment throughout the world.
The Roma Wine Company of Fresno, California, welcomes you again to this weekly half hour of Suspense. Tonight from Hollywood, Roma Wines bring you as stars two of the screen's most distinguished actors, Mr. Thomas Mitchell and Mr. Donald Crisp. They appear this evening in a play written for suspense by Robert Tallman, in which psychiatry is called upon to deal with a sick mind which has unknowingly been tempted thrice by murder. And so with the performance of Thomas Mitchell as the millionaire tycoon Edgar Lowndes and of Donald Crisp as the psychiatrist Dr. Aronson, we again hope to keep you in suspense.
Yes?
There's Mr. Edgar Lowndes here to see you, Dr. Aronson.
Lowndes? Edgar Lowndes? When did we get him for patient?
I think you'd better talk to him, Doctor.
Yes, and I think he'd have to go through the usual routine.
I don't go through usual routines. I'm Edgar Lowndes. I dare say you've heard the name before, Doctor.
Well, who hasn't? Edgar Lowndes, the railroad magnate. Sit down, sir.
Thank you. Well, I'm a man of a few words, Doctor. Frankly, I'm at my wit's end. Why, if my business associates had any idea I was consulting a psychoanalyst, I'd be laughed off the floor of the stock exchange. But we'll never mind that. It's these headaches, Doctor, I've been having. And aspirin, codeine, nothing seems to help.
How long has this been going on?
A little over a month. Since the death of my wife, in fact. We were very attached, you know. Very attached.
Her death was a shock to you?
No, I wouldn't say a shock precisely. She'd been an invalid for years. Bad heart. Wasn't so much what happened the night she died, but the way it happened. Oh, but why shoot off my mouth to you about it? I've told the story 1,000 times till everybody's sick of hearing it.
Well, perhaps you haven't told all the story. Even yet.
Well, as a matter of fact, that's the truth, Doctor. There's one little thing I left out. But the funny part of that is I didn't know it myself till yesterday.
And what was that?
Well, I was dressing for dinner. I was getting ready to go out when in comes my wife's servant. You know, her nurse. She's all aflutter about something and...
Mr. Lowndes, I hope you'll forgive me for bursting in like this, but Mrs. Lowndes...
Yes.
Well, she's resting quite well, Mr. Lowndes, but she did have that little attack this afternoon, and I can't be here this evening. And what with the servants' night out being tonight, I thought...
Yes, you thought I'd better stay with her, and I certainly will. Now you just go along about your business. I look after Mrs. Lowndes personally.
Oh, I knew you'd see it that way. You're a good, considerate man, Mr. Lowndes.
Edgar.
Feeling a little rocky, darling? Well, old Edgar's not going to let you down, not even if it means losing that war contract.
Oh.
I'm going to sit right here with you, sweetheart, and Lowndes, Reed and Company can go hang.
Oh, no, Edgar. There's no reason for you to stay, really. There isn't.
Just the same, I'm going to stay right here with my little wife this evening.
Really, Edgar, it's not necessary. If you'll just get the brown bottle out of the medicine chest, the digitalis, and leave it here by my bed with a glass of water.
And leave you here alone in this big house feeling the way you do? Not much. Not for 100 war contracts.
Now, Edgar, do as I say. Just leave the medicine here by my bed, and everything will be all right. Now, go on, darling, and do as I say. Please, it's the brown bottle.
Now, Dr. Aronson, what would you have done under the circumstances? After all, I'd left her alone before and nothing had happened. And this dinner was important in a business way. That night was my big chance.
Your big chance? Yes, I suppose it was.
Well, to make a long story short, she died while I was out. Now, if only I'd stayed with her. That's what I kept telling myself. And people I told the story to kept telling me that I shouldn't reproach myself. After all, it could have happened to anyone. And then yesterday I was packing up her things, and I came across this bottle in the medicine cabinet. It was the digitalis. I'd left the wrong bottle by her bedside. That was what drove me nearly crazy, Doctor. Finding that bottle. It was bad enough leaving her alone, but making a blunder like that on the medicine, why, it made me feel almost like I'd murdered her.
But as you say, it was your big chance.
Huh? What do you mean? What are you trying to tell me? You mean you think I wanted to get rid of her?
You say that, Mr. Lowndes. I didn't. But I see our time is up. I can't talk to you any more today.
Oh, but you've got to. You can't leave me up in the air like this. Why, you practically accuse me of wanting to murder my wife.
Perhaps we'll understand your feelings towards your wife better, Mr. Lowndes, when we've discussed the others.
What others? Hey, what are you trying to give me?
Relief, Mr. Lowndes, for those headaches of yours.
Tonight for Suspense, Roma Wines are bringing you as stars Mr. Thomas Mitchell and Mr. Donald Crisp, whom you have heard in the first act of Case History on Edgar Lowndes. Tonight's tale of Suspense.
June 8th, 1944, Suspense on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox. Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox, June 8th, 1944, Suspense.
And now it is with pleasure that we bring back to our soundstage Donald Crisp as Dr. Aronson and Thomas Mitchell in the title role of Case History on Edgar Lowndes. A tale well calculated to keep you in suspense.
He's outside now, Doctor. Here are your notes on the case.
Oh, good. Just leave them here on the desk. And, Miss Finchley.
Yes, Doctor?
From now on, when Mr. Lowndes is in the consultation room, I want you to keep an eye on my private office. Make sure that the recording equipment is in operation at all times. I want a record of every word he says in his own voice.
Is this a criminal case, Dr. Aronson?
I don't know yet.
But hadn't you ought to... I'm sorry, Doctor.
You can let him come now, if you will, Miss Finchley.
Yes, Dr. Aronson. The doctor will see you now, Mr. Lowndes.
Thank you. Well. Here I am again. Surprised to see me?
How are the headaches, Mr. Lowndes?
Well, sir, they evaporated just like that. I slept like a top. Don't know how you did it, but you've sold me on this psychiatry deal. So I thought while we were at it, Doctor, I might as well straighten out a couple of other little things that have been worrying me.
I rather thought there were others.
Now, listen, Doctor, don't start talking in riddles again. Maybe you were right. Maybe I did want my wife to die. Unconsciously, of course. Well, why not? She'd been an invalid for years, always complaining, never really getting anything out of life. Yes, sir. After I left your office yesterday, I thought the whole thing over, and I said to myself, Edgar Lowndes, you look at this thing squarely. Maybe you killed her. Maybe leaving the wrong medicine by her bed that night was not so much of an accident as you think it was. So what? You did her a favor. You did yourself a favor. She never really loved you anyway. If Jim Bascom...
Who's Jim Bascom?
Why, he died in a railroad accident. We were brakemen together on the old nickel plate road. Jim and me were like twins. Roomed together, worked together, liked the same thing, even fell in love with the same girl. Why, I remember the night it happened. We were leaving on the
Reckon we better climb on top, Ed. It's our signal.
Hey, wait a minute, Jim. There's Virginia.
Ah, bless her heart. I knew she'd come to see us. Oh, hurry up, sweetheart.
Oh, gee, I'm glad. I was afraid I'd be too late.
There's not a train in the whole nickel plate line you wouldn't hold up for us, Virginia.
Oh, Jim.
Baby.
Hey, what about a kiss for me, too?
Why, Edgar, you're jealous, I do believe.
Well, why not?
There. How's that?
Like my own sister.
Ah, come on, Ed. They're getting impatient up there.
You've got to tell him this time. You hear me, Jim?
Yeah, I'll tell him. I promise, Virginia.
Hey, come on, Jim.
Coming, Ed. Coming.
One more kiss, baby.
Oh, darling. My darling, take care of yourself, Jim.
I will, baby. Don't forget to send out the invitations.
I knew when I saw him kiss her like that, it was all up for me with Virginia. Jim told me when we were crossing the divide. He and Virginia were going to be married the minute they got back to Milwaukee. We were carrying an extra heavy load that haul, and when we started down the pass...
Ed, for the Lord's sake, watch me close. Don't turn your wheel till you see me turn mine. One jolt away, this train's rolling down the grade, and we'll all land in the ravine.
Sure, Jim. Don't worry.
I gotta be in good shape for that wedding, remember?
Yeah, I remember.
I watched him walk back along the cars. It was pretty dark, and I had a cinder in my eyes since we left Salida. I thought I saw him reach the brake wheel on the other car and signal to me. I grabbed the wheel in front of me and braked my car with all the strength of my body. We rolled, free of the car behind. The coupling on Jim's car had broken. The light changed as we crossed the switch, and the runaway cars raced out at a dead-end spur. I saw Jim's body jolt free of the splintering car and hurtle out over the gorge. Just then we plunged into a tunnel. I never found Jim's body. Well, so you can see why I think of trains in connection with death, can't you, Doctor?
Yes. Yes, the association is quite clear.
Uh-huh. Now, you're thinking I killed Jim, too, aren't you? Isn't that what you're thinking?
Is that what you're thinking, Mr. Lowndes?
I don't know what to think. Say, what are you trying to do to me, anyway? I came here to get professional advice. You're trying to drive me crazy.
If that's the way you feel, perhaps you'd better try another doctor.
I will. By George, I will. That's just what I'll do.
Well, good luck, Mr. Lowndes.
Huh? No hard feelings.
No, of course not.
And you won't tell anybody about...
Why, what is it, Mr. Lowndes? You're trembling.
There it is again. It's happening again, Doctor. Say, Doctor, you've got to help me. You've got to. Forget what I said about getting another doctor. I need help.
Mr. Lowndes, calm yourself. What is it? What's happening again?
I'm hearing it again. The train. Like in the dream. Make it go away, Doctor.
But I hear it too, Mr. Lowndes. It's just a commuting train that passes over the bridge out there. Look out of the window. You can see it.
Oh, of course. Thank heaven. I thought the dream had...
You never told me about a dream before.
No, and I'm not going to. You know too much already.
Yes, Mr. Lowndes, I'm afraid you're right. I know too much already.
And I have kept a complete record of each interview with this patient by means of a recording machine concealed in my private office. There is no doubt that the patient has twice committed murder unconsciously, and on the day the patient stopped the analysis, he exhibited hysterical symptoms which were brought on by the sound of a railroad train.
Yes, go on from there, Miss Finchley. A new paragraph. The train is a death symbol for this man and appears to be the subject of a recurrent dream. The danger of the present situation lies in the fact that the patient's unconscious impulses have been brought to the surface without being rationalized. There is, in my opinion, a positive danger that the patient, in his present condition, may commit one or even more conscious murders, particularly should he take it into his head to board a railroad train.
there, sir?
Pardon me, but I noticed you were traveling alone, too, and I wondered if you'd like to join me in a little game of cards.
Oh, well, that's a great idea. Come on in.
Thank you. Railroads are my line. Edgar Lowndes.
Not E.J. Lowndes?
Uh-huh.
Oh, well, this is in the nature of an honor, sir. You're something of a tycoon, Mr. Lowndes.
Thanks.
My name's Ellis. Neckwear's my line.
Mr. Ellis, say, I could use a couple of neckties. Got any samples with you?
Oh, sure thing, Mr. Lowndes. Right here in this case. There you are, sir. Take your pick. Compliments of the Swalligan Cravat Company.
Oh, now this one strikes my fancy.
Well, go ahead. Take it. See any others you like?
Well, let me think.
Oh, hey, there's another tray under there.
Say, hey, look.
What?
Out the window there. See it?
I don't see anything.
Hey, what are you doing? Stop!
So his line was neckwear, was it?
Yes, sir.
Pardon me. But I noticed you were traveling alone, sir, and I wondered if you'd like to join me in a little game of cards.
Oh, that's a good idea. Come in. My name's Jenkins. Cutlery's my line. Knives, scissors, and surgical instruments. What's your line?
Police of 5 Midwestern states are on the lookout tonight for the homicidal maniac who stalked the corridors of the Lightning Express transcontinental luxury train, claiming the total of 3 victims murdered in cold blood. Edgar J. Lowndes, an executive of the railroad who was aboard the train on the fatal night, has posted a personal reward of $50,000 to anyone giving information leading to the arrest of the murderer.
Well, it's happened.
There was nothing you could have done to prevent it, Doctor. Even if you'd sent your report to the police, there wasn't enough evidence.
And there still isn't enough evidence. Well, you run along. I'm going to stay here and finish these reports in longhand. You can type them in the morning.
You're sure you don't need me?
Absolutely.
I think I'll take your advice. Good night, Doctor.
Good night. Oh, Miss Finchley. I almost forgot to tell you... Oh, she's gone. What a nuisance.
Talking to yourself, Doctor?
Lowndes. How did you get in here?
The door was unlocked. Would you rather I'd come back during office hours?
Why, yes. I'd rather you did, Mr. Lowndes. Was it very urgent?
It's the headaches, Doctor. They've come back. It started again about a week ago.
Well, that's after what happened on the train.
Doctor, tell me the truth. Did I commit those murders, or didn't I?
You're the only one who knows the answer to that.
Something to do with the dream, I think.
Oh, yes, the dream. We were getting around to that when you left here the last time. Now, tell me about it.
Well, I hear the sound of the train, and I'm sitting there beside someone, a stranger, I think. He's wearing a checked waistcoat, and there's a heavy gold watch chain with an elk's tooth suspended from it, like the one my father used to wear when I was a child in Wisconsin.
Tell me something about your father.
He died when I was quite young. He'd been an invalid, Doctor, ever since I could remember. He used to sit in an armchair, in a wheelchair it was, really, in front of the parlor window. He looked out into the street hour after hour. Sometimes when I came running into the house, he'd put out his cane and trip me, and I hated him for that. At one time, Doctor, I think I was about 8 or 9 years old at the time.
Edgar, come in here this instant. Your father wants to talk to you.
Oh, heck, Mother, I was going to get up a ball game.
Now, the ball game can wait. You come along with me.
Can I ever have any fun, Mother? Can I?
Hush up. Here he is, Jonathan.
Come closer, boy. We'll never look at you.
Yes, Father?
Just as I thought. Grass stains all over the new suit I bought for you, huh?
Where?
There. And there.
Please.
I won't have him get the idea just because his father's an invalid. He can roll in the dirt like a gutter snipe and get away with it. Stop blubbering. Now go wash your face. I'm driving into town today. I want you to go along, run errands.
The car my father drove was an all-electric, a battery job. His legs were completely paralyzed, and my mother had to practically lift him into it. But the car itself was entirely controlled by hand. Driving it gave him a sense of power he needed. I used to dread those trips into town with him, the horrible spectacle of Mother helping him in and out of the car while the neighbors stared, and then riding along with him alone without anyone, nothing to intervene for me. That was the worst.
June 8th, 1944, Suspense on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox. We'll hear the conclusion of the program following these important messages from your favorite radio station. Thank you so much for making us a part of your day. Just going to take a minute here to tell you about the big savings going on now, the clearance sale at mypillow.com. And you know, I've talked about how in my office I have a pair of my slippers, and they're really comfortable, and they're on clearance right now. The mypillow.com slippers, $25 a pair, limit 10. And I would buy 3 or 4 more pairs. Unfortunately, they're out of my size. They also have sheets, pillowcases, clothing items, all on special right now. Go to mypillow.com, click on the clearance tab at the top of the page, use my promo code Wyatt, or call 1-800-928-4715. Limited sizes remaining in the MyPillow slippers, limited colors on other items. mypillow.com, clearance tab, promo code Wyatt, 1-800-928-4715. Now on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox, the conclusion of Suspense, June 8th, 1944, the case history of Edgar Lowndes.
Mom, speak up, boy. Why don't you say something? Cat got your tongue?
No, sir.
I don't know why I had to raise a boy like you. You don't even keep me company on these trips into town. Poor helpless invalid, your own father.
I'm sorry, sir.
Sorry. I think I'll give you another caning when we get home, just to make good and sure you're sorry, huh? What'd you say to that? Oh, bother. Now look what's happened. Stalled. Battery's run down again. Get out and open the hood in the back, boy. You see a switch there. Turn it to the left where it says reserve battery. Hurry up. We're stopped right on the railroad track.
Turn the switch to the left where it says reserve battery.
Yes. Hurry up. There's a train be along here any minute.
Oh, yes, Father.
Don't just stand there looking stupid. Go and turn the switch, as I told you. What's the matter with you? Have you gone crazy? Don't you hear the train coming, Edgar? Edgar, you want your father to be killed? I can't get out of here by myself, Edgar. Now, please do as I say.
No, the train could kill you for all I care. I'm going back home.
Son, don't you understand what you're doing? You're murdering your own father. Now, this is murder. Murder, I tell you, murder. Murder.
I walked home with those words of his ringing in my ears. I can hear him yelling yet. Son, don't you understand what you're doing? You're murdering your own father. Murder! It's murder, I tell you! It's murder! Murder! But I never felt a qualm. Those words were like sweet music to me, Doctor. Well, that's the end of the story. But it's only the beginning. When I walked into this office for the first time, I was a man suffering from headaches, seemingly brought on by grief over the death of a loved one. Now I see myself as a man who murdered his father, his best friend, and his wife, who must kill and kill again, because every time I kill, I'm killing him, my father, whom I hated beyond all comprehension, and for whom one death agony was not enough. Now that you know all about these things, my dear doctor, I'm afraid that you'll have to be the next on my list.
Put that gun away, Edgar. You don't really want to kill me.
I'd be a fool if I didn't.
Well, the headaches will come back, Edgar. There'll be no one here to cure them.
They won't come back. You showed me what caused them, didn't you, Doctor?
You'll have worse things than headaches. You'll begin to hear things. You'll have delusions. You'll think you can hear a train passing outside at this very moment, don't you? But if you look out of the window, you'll see there's no train there at all.
You won't trick me into turning my back. Come out from behind that desk. Keep your hands up high. That's it. Now then. What was that?
Don't you understand what you're doing?
Where's that voice coming from?
You're murdering your own father.
There it is again.
It's murder, I tell you. Murder!
Stop it.
Murder!
Stop it.
Murder!
Stop it.
I hear no voice.
Stop it! I can't stand it. I've killed myself.
Then give me the gun, Edgar.
Please, Doctor, make it stop. Take it away. Only here. Make it stop.
That's enough, Miss Finchley. Shut it off.
Are you all right, Dr. Aronson?
Yes, thank you. You almost had me thinking I was hearing voices.
Well, I did hear voices, and that's why I came back. And I remembered about your wanting Mr. Lowndes' interviews recorded, so I went in the other room and started the machine. When he became violent, I played back the last part of the record, thinking it might divert his attention.
Good girl. We've got all the evidence we need now to put Mr. Lowndes where he can't do any more harm.
You may have evidence, but you haven't got me, and you won't get me alive.
Dr. Aronson, the window! Stop him!
Sorry, Doctor. I can't wait. I've got to catch a train. Hey, Jim! Wait for me!
21 floors to the street. Or is it 20? Do they skip 13 in this building?
Well, it doesn't matter to Lowndes. He's back with his friend Jim Baskin on the old nickel plate line. Listen. It's just crossing the divide.
And so closes Case History on Edgar Lowndes, starring Thomas Mitchell and Donald Crisp. Tonight's tale of Suspense. Suspense is produced and directed by William Spear.
This is Donald Crisp, and I'm sure I speak for both Mr. Mitchell and myself in saying how much we've enjoyed appearing this evening as the guests of Suspense, which I'm sure must be one of your favorite programs, as it is one of ours.
Thomas Mitchell will next be seen in the 20th Century Fox production of Wilson. Donald Crisp will be seen in the coming Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer production National Velvet.
Suspense. Presented by Roma Wines. R-O-M-A. Made in California for enjoyment throughout the world.
The following message from our United States Treasury is brought to you by Roma Wines. The invasion is on, the biggest in history, and it needs backing that is equally big. So back the attack. Buy war bonds. Buy more than before.
June 8th, 1944, Suspense on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox. Now on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox, we go back to 1940 for an episode of the syndicated Can You Imagine That? And the $2 billion bet.
Two men bet more than $2 billion on a building. Cows in Scotland wear sweaters. A herring is never seen alive.
Can you imagine that? Yes, this is Lindsay McCarry back again, ladies and gentlemen, with odd gleanings from libraries, newspapers, and encyclopedias. In just 1.5 minutes, we'll all be back with proof of the statements made a few seconds ago. So until then, wait around, won't you please? I'm sure you must have all heard or read at some time of the custom of placing copies of current newspapers, coins, legal documents, pictures, phonograph records, and whatnot in the cornerstone of a new building. This custom may seem to us to be an estimable method by which to preserve for posterity the modes and manners of the day. It may appear to be a gladsome salutation to the erection of a new building, an auspicious recognition of the beauty of the handiwork of man. But the origin of laying a cornerstone is one of the most bloody in all the annals of antiquity. To prehistoric men, the raising of any edifice whatever was a direct act of impiety, a challenge to the wrath of their ancient gods. Man was born to live in caves, to take shelter under trees, as did his animal brothers. And when he presumed to erect any sort of building toward the heavens, he was flying in the face of possible vengeance from the gods. Ancient man was convinced this was true because so many buildings were struck by lightning, shattered by earthquakes, or ravaged by the elements. So to appease this supposed righteous wrath, human beings were buried alive under the foundations of any new structures. Thus, our present custom of laying a cornerstone actually originated in the ghastly custom of human sacrifice. If you were the heir to either J.D. Stotler or R.E. Collins of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, you would be able to collect more than $2 billion. Yes, I said more than $2 billion. But you'd have to wait until the year 2432 to collect. Why? Well, it was back in 1932 that the two men were arguing about the new Capitol building in Baton Rouge, said Mr. Stotler.
Say, that's what I call a building.
For $5 million, they should have had a better one.
Say, this one will stand for 500 years. That's how well it's built.
500 years? I'll lay you money it won't.
Put up or shut up.
I've got $2.50 that says this building won't last 500 years.
And here's my money that says it will.
Well, the two men banked their bets under contract. Then in July 1938, they went to the bank and reaffirmed their contract. Said an official of the bank to them,
"Gentlemen, I don't know whether you're aware of it or not, but that original stake has grown to $6.85. That's with 4% interest."
Let's see. Bet doesn't get paid off until 500 years. That's added to 1932. Then.
The year 2432.
Correct. And you've made provision for the bet to be paid to the heirs of the winner.
That's right.
Just as a matter of curiosity, sir, how much will that amount to in 2432 A.D.?
I thought you'd ask that. Here are the figures. In the year 2432, the heirs or heir of the bet's winner will receive $2,084,495,605.22.
Can you imagine that? Over $2 billion can be collected on a $2.50 bet. The 22 cents seems a little picayunish, but who knows what 22 cents may buy in 2432 A.D. To those who believe the crow or the raven to be birds of evil omen, here's a news story that will clinch that belief. It's rather weird and smacks of the supernatural, but I'm going to report the story just as I read it in a newspaper of February 27, 1931. It was in Sydney on that day that Justice Hugh Ross was addressing the prisoner at the bar, Alfred Beckett. A crowded courtroom hung on his words.
Made by this court. And it is now the duty of this court to pronounce sentence upon you, Alfred Beckett. Alfred Beckett, it is the judgment of this court that you are to be electrocuted.
The crow. Yeah, the crow. There he is again.
I must ask the spectators to remember that this is more serious than can be imagined. Alfred Beckett, I hereby sentence you to be executed in the electric chair in the state penitentiary.
Yes, sir. There he is, right on schedule, too.
Weird, that's what it is. Weird. Don't tell me it's just a coincidence either. This is the 5th time.
Hey, what's this all about? I'm a reporter. I'd like to get the story.
What for? No one'd believe it if you printed it.
Oh, I don't know. They might. What is the story?
You're looking right up at it, son.
That crow? What are you talking about?
The crow, that's what we're talking about. This is the 5th time it's appeared.
Well, what's so odd about a crow roosting in a tree and cawing his head off?
Son, that same crow has lighted in that same tree and cawed in exactly the same way 5 times now.
And each time he did it, the judge was reading a death sentence against somebody.
No.
See? You don't believe it. Ask anybody. Last time he did it was when Justice Ross was sentencing Bing Anderson, that ski jumper, to death.
Maybe you'll call it coincidence, son, but people around these parts don't call it that anymore. Not after 5 times. Seems like that crow knows just when to perch in that tree and start cawing. Listen to him.
Yes, that same crow, according to the people of the region, roosted in the same tree and cawed at the exact moment the death sentence was being pronounced upon a prisoner during 5 death trials. Can you imagine that? From a San Francisco paper of March 2nd, 1917, comes the ultimate in animal highlights. Visiting the Golden Gate City at that time was Sir Francis Webster of Edinburgh, Scotland, who stated that... Oh, but wait, let's have Sir Francis tell us.
As owner of one of the finest dairies in Scotland, I've been asked what is the most modern step in dairy farming. Well, the latest is dressing the cows in knitted sweaters in winter to keep them warm. The sweaters are much like those made for humans, buttoning around the neck and chest. Unlike a blanket, they cannot be misplaced when the cow lies down.
Knitted sweaters for cows. We wonder what Bossy would think when a couple of attendants were buttoning the latest turtleneck style around the bovine body. At any rate, it must have been startling to anyone to come suddenly upon a pasture dotted with daisy bells and flossies, all decked out in what the well-dressed cow will wear. Can you imagine that? Here's an interesting bit of phrase origin. You've probably used the expression as dead as a herring. But do you know why you use it? Do you know just how dead a herring really is? Well, according to our sources of information, very, very few people have ever seen a live herring. Sailors and others who know the sea and its ways and the ways of its denizens will tell you that as soon as a herring is taken from the water, it dies instantly. Fishermen were quick to adapt this peculiarity of the herring to their everyday speech and added the expression, as dead as a herring, to their already colorful vocabularies. Of course, it was a short step from the fisher folk to the landlubbers who wanted to know why the expression was used. They were told, and soon the phrase took hold. And nowadays, when we want to say something is particularly defunct, we say it's as dead as a herring. Can you imagine that? Well, now, I imagine that most of you, at one time or another, have heard the old vaudeville wheeze that goes something like this.
Say, Joe, did you know the two states are fighting over where I was born?
No. Is that so?
Yep. New York says I was born in New Jersey, and New Jersey says I was born in New York.
Well, I'm sorry that we can't tell you the date of the origin of that gag, but none of the volumes in the archaeology department of our library go farther back than 5000 B.C. We can tell you, however, about an amazing woman over whose residence no fewer than 4 states fought at one time. This woman was the famous Hetty Green, who, when she died in 1917, left a fortune of $170 million. Despite the fact that she and her husband had lived and reared their children in Bellows Falls, Vermont, the state of New York began its fight to prove that it was actually in that state that Hetty Green had been a resident. For it was in New York that she had transacted her business almost daily. It was there that she kept her deposits. It was there that her husband had courted her. Vermont, on the other hand, claimed that she had retained her family homestead and paid taxes on it in that state. Counsel for Vermont also said that at no time had Hetty Green established legal residence in New York, whereas upon many documents she had given her residence as Bellows Falls. Suddenly, in the midst of this legal battle, 2 other states raised objections and claimed the residence of Mrs. Green, Massachusetts and New Jersey. Why all this embattlement over the citizenship of one woman? Were they all going to raise monuments to her memory? Well, not quite. It was a little matter of a transfer tax on her estate amounting to $6 million. This was the amount that New York was claiming from her heirs. The case was carried on through to the U.S. Supreme Court, and Vermont was ultimately declared to have been Hetty Green's legal residence, whereupon the heirs paid a tax of $52,000, and the case was closed. Can you imagine that? Comes time now for the music lesson. But don't run away like that. We're not going to hold a metronome over your head or strike your fingers sharply with a ruler if you don't get things right. All we're going to do is play over a couple of songs, and you can join in the community singing, too. For you all know the song. It's Hail, Hail, the Gang's All Here. But do you know where that jolly song of comradeship and convivial living may have come from? Well, listen to this for a moment. Of course, you recognize that. It's part of the Anvil chorus from Verdi's opera Il Trovatore. That first part contains more than just a hint of Hail, Hail, the Gang's All Here. Verdi wrote Il Trovatore in 1853. Then about a quarter of a century later came Gilbert and Sullivan with their delightful and extremely clever series of musical comedies. Far be it from us to suggest that these two geniuses of biting satire and musical wit would have accepted a suggestion from Verdi's opera, but holding that phrase from the Anvil chorus in your mind, listen to this selection from The Pirates of Penzance by Gilbert and Sullivan.
Truce to navigation, take another station. Let's bury piracy with a little burglary. Come, friends who plow the sea, truce to navigation, take another station. Let's bury piracy with a little burglary.
Did you catch it? Of course. So perhaps from one, perhaps from the other, we got our song that is always sung when a few of the boys from the class of '93 get together for a little fun and frolic. And here's the way it might go.
do we care? What the heck do we care? Hail, hail, we're full of cheer. What the heck do we care now?
And there you have a tabloid history of Hail, Hail, the gang's all here. If you'll tear off the hide from the nearest elephant and write a short history of the Orient on it, we may send you another musical history a little later. But right now comes time for me to turn you back to your own station announcer. Until we meet again then, this is Lindsay McCarry saying goodbye now.
Back in 1940, you didn't have the Internet. I know that's a surprise to some of you that the Internet didn't always exist. Neither did cell phones But the interesting thing about this show is it gave you all those interesting little things that you didn't have time to look through all these newspapers to find. And that's one of the interesting things about a show like this. Interesting facts and little tidbits of musical trivia, if you will. There you go. From 1940, independently syndicated, Lindsay McCarry, and Can You Imagine That? Here on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox. Thank you so much for making us a part of your day. Would you do me a favor? Thank this radio station, support their advertisers. Their kindness and courtesy allow us to be with you each and every time you roll around here on your favorite station. Now, if you miss a day, you don't have to miss a single show. You can find all of our shows available for streaming on demand at classicradio.stream. Classicradio.stream. Stream the shows, find lists of podcast sites that have our shows available for you. You can also find our social media links. You can also buy me a copy. Now, the Buy Me a Coffee money helps us acquire additional classic radio collections. It also helps us maintain our distribution channels so we can keep coming to you here on your favorite station. That's at classicradio.stream. Classicradio.stream. Have yourself a great day and tell all of your friends the greatest radio shows of all time are right here at this spot on the dial. Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox on your favorite radio station.